Hello, everybody. We are live and hanging out for the Juju Show number 14. And I've got with me my dear friend, Mr. Marco. Marco, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you doing, Rick?
I am doing well. It is a beautiful day out. No offense, but I want to get this over so I can go head outside. I need to take my laptop. We'll travel to the backyard, I think, at least. We have a show today of some notes of things. So let's kick off our regular kabang with community news. And there are a few things in the community that I think are worth noting this week. One is there is a thread around moving charm helpers, which is the library of tools used for helping to write charms to GitHub from Launchpad. And it was overwhelmingly +1 by the community. And I talked to James Page, who's been leading this, and he was doing a test run of the migration script from Launchpad to GitHub today, and it will be going there. So I have the URL to the new repo in the show notes, and I'm sure as soon as James completes the test run, the test run seemed to go okay, so I think he's going to actually do the actual move this week. So keep an eye out for it, and if you've been looking or dying to submit that update, that pull request to Charm Helpers, look for it in its new home on the juju.org/charm-helpers GitHub. And I know it was kind of fun. There's a couple of people who actually called out that they were waiting to do some updates on this. So go get it. Let's see. Next up, Beatty bent everyone's brains and actually taught me a little bit about how Juju worked with his little post about how he works with Jazz to help provide pre-built models for his developers to work on. And what was really funny is that Jazz out of the box will deploy to the three big public clouds we've got, Google, Azure, and AWS. What he was actually doing was a little bit different. He would create a model, and then he would add a remote machine that was prepared. And that remote machine happened to be a VirtualBox virtual machine running Ubuntu on a developer's laptop. And by adding that machine, he could then deploy to that machine applications, charms, that were targeted at LXD containers on that machine that was now registered in the model in Jazz. So it's a very roundabout way. What's interesting is that it gave him multi-user access, so he could go into that model and he could deploy and add unit and set config and such to pre-seed and set up the LXD containers on that developer's now VirtualBox virtual machine running Ubuntu, such that a pre-done development environment was ready to go with charms, but on their laptop.
I think I read this and it was so cool to read because it reminded me a long, long time ago when we first started getting involved in the Juju project. I remember there was a big debate about, do we focus on cloud providers first, or should we go from the bottom up where you just start with a machine and then the provisioning just happens to be this nebulous thing? Someone could have created it. It could have been an Amazon API. And it's so cool to see these decisions that were made really early on the project leveraged in ways that no one expects. So, he doesn't bootstrap. It's nothing. It's Jazz. You log in. Some developer gave him an IP address to a machine on their laptop, and he just adds that to a model that's being managed by Jazz. And now a bunch of people can collaborate around that VM. And it was such a cool and unique way to kind of enable that really fast developer workflow without having to do the bootstraps and management, the whole LXD area. I thought it was really cool and a great story that I'd love to see a tutorial written around. I know he wrote a blog post, I think, as well.
He's got a blog post in the Beatty Everbrief. His post to the mailing list was just a link to the blog post. So I think we all chased it down and went, "What is this?" And what was great was that there were folks who work with Juju day in and day out. I assumed that when you ran add machine, the controller SSH'd and triggered the connection to the new machine, but it's actually the way around. The client does it. So the controller, you don't have any firewall concerns. Like, you don't have to. I thought he had to set up NAT and all that. Yeah, he didn't have to do any of that. Like, Beatty's one sly little bugger, I gotta say. Like, he took advantage of stuff I didn't even know you could. So that was kind of fun. What I do think the takeaway I took away from it was that it just goes to show that hybrid cloud's more than just I want to run some stuff on bare metal locally and some stuff remotely. Like, there's ways of melding this hybrid cloud bit. Like, you could totally see Beatty now providing services in that model say a database or something, and all the developer little VMs connecting to that database. And that database could be on AWS or something central. Well, all these little machines are on all these little developer laptops everywhere, right? So talk about a truly hybrid model of things dev on a laptop right in the same model with production, or stuff running on, on the public cloud. Like the possibilities there were kind of like blew my mind. So that's very cool. Definitely check out the thread on the mailing list, and tell us. I'd love to hear how are you guys leveraging Juju in just interesting ways. It's fun to see what people come up with and how they use the tools we build. So next up, we have a post, and I don't know how to say his name properly, so I'm gonna butcher and feel bad. Is it Feng XIA? He got a nice little post. He's been doing a lot of work, and I wanted to kind of highlight trying to get Juju and CentOS playing nice. And the biggest thing is he's doing charming work, which involves Python tools. And I think a lot of us have moved to Python 3, and we forget that not everyone can do that. And so he's been doing some really great stuff, documenting and highlighting how he's made things work in a Python 2 world on CentOS. And what I love is that, it's a case of someone's using tools, get work done. They're trying to get through and figure, to kind of go through it, and it works. It's just that, the community is providing, let's call it a wider support structure than what we have out of the box. But there's nothing that prevents Juju from working on CentOS. There's nothing that prevents these charms and stuff being Python 2 and 3 compatible. It's good stuff, and I wanted to kind of highlight and say, if you're in that boat, if you're interested in Juju, but go, we're on this kind of potentially old infrastructure, that's okay. You know what? It's all still possible, and there are others that are doing the same thing. And the more folks that do it, the lighter the work gets, right? So good work, Feng.
So this was Feng Sha from Lenovo. Yeah. Do you know what he's working on, though? I haven't really figured out.
No.
I know he's got some interesting problems that he's been working through, but I wasn't quite sure what he was trying to charm up.
I'm not sure. I think his early posts were actually around building and deploying on CentOS. So I think he's got some internal workload stuff. But you know what? I haven't heard actually what the details are. Maybe it's totally worth reaching out and saying hi and getting an idea. So back to the last post we talked about, like, what cool stuff are you doing with Juju? Feng, what cool stuff are you doing with Juju? You're doing a lot of great work on the Python 2 and getting it to build over there. We're curious on what the end result is. What are you actually working on getting going?
Wow. Actually, what I just found, so I was reading through that email thread again real briefly. He linked to a page that he wrote about Python 2 charms. It's a repo that has a bunch of wiki pages, and some of them are actually really quite interesting. Put them in the show note. I'm not sure if you trolled through this little wiki on this repo, but it starts to map out a lot of architectural stuff, like where pieces of Juju intersect with charms and what the mechanics look like, and it's actually a really interesting.
Yeah, he's really been trying to understand how Juju works. He's been putting together some notes on getting started, and I think this wiki stuff is kind of the output of what he's been working on. And you can see he's been plowing through this for a little bit now in a lot of different areas. And charming is kind of the new button. And what I love is that he goes through and then he writes up, like you say, these wiki pages and things and shares them on the mailing list. So join the Juju mailing list, get some of the info, and see what fun's going on there. Next up was kind of a question, and I wanted to highlight it. The question was they have a way of logging into the LXD containers on an OpenStack that they had deployed with Juju. And my first reaction when I saw the title was, well, of course, Juju SSH unit number. Well, they had some kind of infrastructure problem, and so they didn't have the controller to manage the SSH for them. In which case, the answer was, but of course, the only trick you have to remember is that the username on those VMs, the images that come down, is Ubuntu @ So when you SSH, it's not your username, it's SSH Ubuntu @ the address of the instance it's running. And so the reason I wanted to highlight this is a few things. Is that we've been working on, and there's more work to be done, but I know, like in the Jazz world, we have this where it's very important to have an SSH key for your models, because a lot of things in Juju, while it's not SSH driven, it can use it, be it whether you're trying to pull down files or content from a unit, whether it's trying to Juju run, actually, I think leverages SSH at times. And so you need to be able to have, having SSH really makes a model more pleasant and easy to work with. And there are a series of commands for folks that don't realize this. There's an add SSH key, listing keys, and you can manage the keys for multiple users and all that. And I want to make sure folks are aware of that, because keeping SSH access can oftentimes be important. The Kubernetes, canonical Kubernetes distribution out of the box has you Juju SCP some files down from the workload. I know some charms leverage writing passwords that are generated to a file, and then you basically Juju SCP the password file down from the unit. A lot of things will run an action, will generate a file output on the unit, and you'll want to be able to SCP that file back down. And so it's SSH is very alive and well in Juju land. And if you're going to run production infrastructure, I would definitely make sure that if you have a set of keys for your operators or even your developers and such, that you make sure that those keys are there, that you check that they're there. I think there's a list SSH keys, add SSH key, and so on. So key management built into Juju in the command lines, leverage it, use it, love it. And it gets you out of cases like this. If your machine with your controller and you had a bad situation go down, you still got SSH access to those things and they keep running and trucking. So yeah. And finally, a heads up. This is kind of a precursor. Normally I'm covering stuff that's already hit the mailing list and all that, but this is kind of a heads up. It's not there yet. There's been an upgrade to the Juju GUI, which has a lot of good fixes in it. I think there's something like a dozen bugs and a bunch of good feature updates in there, including better representation with subordinates. There's some better usability on your credential management section of Jazz, which is coming out and will be deployed here shortly. But what I want to remind folks is that when the Juju GUI gets updated, we often kind of say, well, Jazz is updated, there's a new UI. Well, the same UI is kind of leveraged for the GUI that's built into every controller out there. If you ever bootstrap, by default, you can run the Juju GUI command and get that GUI up and log into it and switch between your models and all that. And when the GUI is updated, it's very simple to update the GUI that you've got there. You just run Juju upgrade Juju-GUI. Or maybe it was actually Juju upgrade GUI. Sorry. I should have had this better in here. Let's upgrade GUI, I think. Yes. Juju space upgrade -GUI. And so if you run that, it will actually go and pull down from the canonical services a validated Juju GUI release, update it on your controller, and voila, the next time you log in or refresh that window for your GUI, you've got the latest, greatest stuff. So for those of you that are running controllers, make sure to update your GUI when you get that. Get some new hot goodness.
How what's the kind of expected support for the Juju GUI for like potentially older versions of controllers?
So I believe that we have kind of forked off that because the GUI was built into 2.0. So if you're in 125,
talk about the 2.0 world. Let's go.
If you're in the 2.0 world, the GUI team does a lot of hard work to make sure it's supported across. So if you're on 2.0.x, for some reason you don't want to go, you can still upgrade the GUI. It's all safe. So the support is for right now is that 2.x is all the same Juju GUI.
Is there a way to see what version of the GUI I'm running?
You know what? So I think this is either in this release or a previous release. They have actually added the version number into the help dropdown in the GUI itself so that we can tell that easier. And so if you're on a new enough GUI, I believe you can go and drop that down. And actually, I've got a GUI open here for a thing I was going to talk about. So let me go and see.
I've got a controller that I've had running for a little while. I don't think I've ever upgraded the GUI on it.
Yeah, no, you got to upgrade the GUI. Get the GUI.
I wonder if I should just do that right now.
Yeah. No harm, no foul. Nothing like live updates on the fly. Marco's brave, man. But anyway, so just a reminder, GUIs get updated, and when the team hits the email list with the thread, they'll note how to upgrade it and all that. So it's good. It should be in any day now. We'll see that out. I think they're just waiting for it to go live on jujucharms.com before sending the official announcement. So it's there. It's in the release, but it's just not been all the way through all of our different production systems yet. So look for that. And that leads us to our main topic, which is actually another item from the mailing list I wanted to highlight. Juju 2.2-RC1 is live. It's out there. RC1 means 2.2 is imminent. The team is locked down 2.2. The branches are all been created and locked out. Test. Bang on RC1. The team is confident that 2.1 is ready to go into release, which means that any day now they will cut that. So test it so you can find it. I kind of always call it challenge accepted. The team says it's ready. I dare you to find a reason why it's not. Go out and bang on it and file any bugs and things so that we catch it early rather than late. But I wanted to highlight a few things of what's kind of new in 2.2. There's a few kind of interesting things to highlight. So let's start off with the provider updates. There were 3 main provider chunks of work that have gone into 2.2. Number 1 is vSphere support. If you're running on VMware, the VMware provider was in earlier releases of Juju, but it had some, we'll call them usability warts. Things like selecting networks to bootstrap to and such, I know were a bit of a pain point. And the team put a bunch of work into making that much smoother and easier. And I think you even saw Sam do a post running Kubernetes with GPUs and VMware on vSphere recently. So he was using, I believe, a 2.2 beta at the time, kind of showing that off working a lot better. The next one is OpenStack updates. There's been some work to make sure it goes in and handles the Nova to Neutron based networking APIs smoothly, so that as OpenStack deprecates the older Nova APIs, that it's ready to go. And there were some other improvements on security group management and reuse, as well as a handful of bugs. They'll be in the release notes when they hit those out. And so keep an eye on if you had any kind of issues there. And then I wanted to, let's see if I can get my screen share here going. I want to highlight one of them in particular is interesting. So can you see my thing here? That was me playing with the GUI. All right, can you spot the thing that's new and interesting? I'll give you a hint, it's not the green one.
Besides Jazz or Oracle?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so there's an experimental Oracle provider in Juju 2.2. It is not behind a feature flag. But we're still engaged with Oracle on improving the experience of getting started. There's a documentation page, which we'll have linked in the show notes for getting started. But the Oracle has a public cloud now, and it's pretty fast. I've been impressed with my time to getting instances. The machines are decent. What's fun is that I think the smallest machine is 8 gigs of RAM. And so, yeah. As you can see down here, the 768, 7.6 gigs or whatever it is. So the machines are decent size. The performance is going really well. You can see here I've got our Kubernetes deploy and a CI deploy. So here I've got GitLab server with Jenkins and a cell termination proxy playing with our kind of some of our dev stack bits on it. And I can switch over to my kind of production K8, even though it's not production. This is Rick tinkering. But here you can see our canonical Kubernetes. Oh no! What happened? My hook failed. How dare it? I'll have to go look at that. So here you can see I've been kind of playing with and pushing and beating on the Oracle provider and making sure it's all working smoothly. And so far, other than my hook error that I've got to chase down, everything seems to be working really fine. So if you're an Oracle customer or you're interested on checking out some of their new cloud offering bits, definitely check it out. And it's one of those, Juju, it's everywhere you want to be. I feel like we need an awesome tagline for that. So that's the kind of